Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to look at everybody's worst nightmare, white paint. It's a very daunting thing, especially if you want to do something like a white army, like white scars, or you custom make your own chapter, or you're painting something you 3D printed. We're going to take a look at that today as to which white paints you should look at. And I'd appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe, hit the little bell notification icon so you know when I post a new video. Do me a favor and bear with me while I figure out how to do this whole YouTube thing again. I have been out of the game for quite a few years and I'm trying to figure out how to do all of this again. So without further ado, let's take a dive in and look at the different white paints that are available on the market, at least the handful of them that I've run across. So I'm going to run through, just kind of putting the paints down where they need to go, and then we'll evaluate them once they're dry. Let's start with the Chimera. Going into Pro Acryl from Chimera. Certainly spreads nicer. May take a few brush dips. And it is important to note for this, I'm not thinning my paints for doing this because I want it to be stark, one coat. I want to see what one application of unthinned paint gets you for vibrancy and how well it'll cover, because that will ultimately determine how many coats it's going to take. And with white being such a notoriously difficult color to paint, that is going to be very important. Plus you also see the different, just because you buy white paint doesn't mean it is white. Well, let me elaborate on that. It will still be white, but it's what shade of white. And we're seeing pretty quick here that there are some variances in coat, in color. You can see there's a couple of them as they dry, they're already getting a shine to some of them, or they're showing thin spots. And so far we've done Pro Acryl, Chimera, and then this is Army Painter going on. The last one I did was Green Stuff World. Alright, the Army Painter going on kind of as we'd expect. That's more or less our control. The one you're not going to see from me on here is the one from Games Workshop, because their white paints have always been chunky, chalky, very just not good. Alrighty. Going back to one of the model industry standards that has been around for a long time, and this is just going to come straight out of the pot. Not going onto a wet palette at all. This is Tamiya. And for the longest time, this was the one everybody wanted. Before all these other model paint companies started coming in. Because for the longest time, it had been the truest white you could get. apply just about as much of that Tamiya as the other ones. It's a little harder to gauge now that I'm coming out of the jar instead of having it on a wet palette how much paint I'm using. So that one is kind of a guesstimate, and my Tamiya paint's also a little old, so I'm doing my best to give it a fair shake as far as that's concerned. We'll move this guy back out of the way before I knock it over. Now for too much paint. All right, that little glob I put out there, like I said, these are unthinned, but that was the Golden Artist Color Titanium White Heavy Body Acrylic. So what this is, it's got a couple extra binders in it. It's very heavily pigment saturated. So this, if you were going to put it on a model, I would highly recommend thinning it and do a couple of tests, kind of like what I'm doing here, because it behaves differently than your regular model paints, because they use different binders for artist acrylics versus model paints. And then the last one I'm going to use, kind of just a show here, is a white ink. So this is usually used for intensity and to do very small highlights, or you can even do zenithals through an airbrush with it. It's super intense. It's just pigment and liquid, no binder. And this one I'm actually not going to use a brush to get it down on here right away. I'm going to use the dropper. So if I was doing this on a model, I'd be doing it very differently. We can cover that in an edge highlighting video, but you can see even on here, just putting it down, there's a lot of surface tension there and it wants to run around by itself. So we're going to take our brush now and just kind of spread it around. And this is primarily why you can see right here that white ink, it's very thin, and you can see how it wants to cling to the edges when I run it through here. You don't want to try and paint a white surface with ink, but in a few seconds here when this is dry, you'll be able to see the difference between all of these. So now that these are dry, you can really see more of a difference. The Tamiya is a really nice white, but it's very thin. I'm not 100% sure that's the paint's fault. It's a jar that I've had for a very long time, so it may just be all that pigment sedimented at the bottom. The Golden Heavy Body Acrylic did a fantastic job with full coverage, but you can see if I move it in the light here, they do dry with a more satin to not quite a glossy finish, which that'll go away as soon as you clear coat it with a matte varnish. The Army Painter behaved almost exactly like we'd expect it to. It's full of brush marks and ragged edges. The Pro Acryl covered quite nicely for only being one coat, as did the Chimera. The Chimera would definitely need another coat, and I've heard a lot of things with Chimera that they're kind of spotty for quality. I may have just gotten lucky on this one, and I'm not upset about that at all. And the last one to talk about is the ink right here. With this one, you can see it doesn't cover very well, but it really sunk down into those cracks, and what white is there is incredibly punchy and vibrant. You can really see the texture underneath. Primarily, that's why with these white inks like that, you're going to use them for a zenithal out of your airbrush, or you're going to use them for edge highlighting in very small amounts. because it is a very intense color, but you're not going to get good coverage over an area, which is good if you're looking to do something that's very shiny, especially down in cracks, or if you're doing a darker model that you really want those edges to punch out. That's going to be great for it. And then the last one we have here is Green Stuff World. Green Stuff World, I'm still a little iffy on. The coverage isn't terrible. Like, it's definitely better than Army Painter as far as how even the coat went on. And then we will take a look at the front of this vehicle here again. So this has been a conglomeration of a couple different paints, because I started out trying one paint and it didn't cover well, so I just kept throwing different paints at it until I had coverage I was happy with. Sometimes that is what you had to do. But we will talk about a different tip for keeping your paints, or painting white, I should say. For painting white and making it look the best. There you have it. Kind of an idea of which white paints work best, depending on what application you're looking at. But probably the best way to paint white paint is to not actually paint white. Save white for your brightest highlights, the biggest, punchiest parts that you want to do. Use light yellows and bring in your other complementing colors, because if you hold a sheet of copy paper up that's supposedly pure white, hold it up against, your couch or a tablecloth, just anything really, you're going to see that there's color reflected back into the white, and it isn't truly white anymore. That's why a lot of times when I have to do white, I actually paint off white. I use a lot of bone colors and things like that, things that have more of a yellow tint to them, because they're going to give a more real feel. And it's going to wind up looking, one, cleaner, because typically those paints with the extra pigments and binders spread a little easier. Pure yellow can be a nightmare all of its own, and there's tricks and ways to get around that too, which we may visit later. But usually how to paint white is one of the biggest questions that gets brought up within the hobby community. I just wanted to address that today. I hope you all liked the video. Thank you for bearing with me while I'm trying to remember how to go through and do all those things that please the algorithm and make the videos more interesting for you guys. Hopefully here we're going to grow, we're going to get better. I'm going to get better at doing this. So please like, subscribe, hit the little bell, so that way you get notified when I post a new video. It's always more fun to do things when you get to do them with others and when you get to grow with other people. So by all means, we'll see you next time.